What is up, everybody, and welcome to FLW videos. In today's episode, we're going to be performing a deep dive on two Pokemon, Zacian and Zamazenta. So these Pokemon are going to be introduced into Pokemon Go very soon, put into raids in celebration for the Ultra Bonus Unlock Part 3, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions about these Pokemon. First off, what's going to be the best Pokemon to go against these Pokemon? So we're going to be doing a raid counter guide, as well as doing the typical deep dive where we take a look at these Pokemon stats, their moveset, which is officially data mined in Pokemon Go, and then finally deciding anything and everything around worth being invested into, and of course how you can use these Pokemon for the best benefit. But anyways, I hope you do enjoy this series. If you do enjoy the deep dive series, make sure to turn that like button shiny, and of course subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. But anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. So the first thing that we're going to do is take a look at the stats for these Pokemon and talk about the Hero of Many Battles form. There is another form that we will talk about that will be released at some point in the future, referred to as the crowned versions. We will talk about them because maybe that dictates how hard you end up going after these Pokemon. So first we have Zamazenta in that Hero of Many Battles form, and Zamazenta in this form is a pure fighting type Pokemon, has a very impressive overall stat ranking of 39th in Pokemon Go. And taking a look at the individual stats, we've got the defense ranked at the best, ranked at 45th with a defense stat of 236, followed by the attack stat ranked at 86th in Pokemon Go with an attack stat of 254. And then its worst stat is its stamina stat, which is ranked at 200th, and its stamina stat is 192. So that's actually very impressive because this Pokemon literally has two stats that are ranked in the top 100, and its worst stat is still ranked within the top 200. So kudos to you, Zamazenta, looking good there. And then of course we can get into the relative ranking versus those fighting type Pokemon. We can see that Zamazenta, out of 56 fighting type Pokemon, ends up having the 6th best overall stats in Pokemon Go versus the fighting type Pokemon. And its stats pretty much stay the same, where the defense stat is the dominant, followed by the attack, and then followed by the stamina. So everything is pretty much in line in the relative sense. And then of course we head over to Zacian. Zacian actually has the exact same set of stats, which is very interesting because the only thing that's going to change is its typing, which is a fairy type, and versus fairy type Pokemon, the stats could end up being very good. So if we take a look at the relative rank, we can see that Zacian in its Hero of Many Battles form as a pure fairy type Pokemon versus 45 fairy types, it ends up having the 2nd best overall ranking for the fairy type versus those stats, which is pretty impressive. And we actually see a little bit of a switch in its best stat versus the fairy types, where it's actually the attack stat that ends up leading the pack, ranked at 4th versus those fairy types. And that literally just means that Zacian stats are pretty good versus overall, but when you get specifically into fairy types, its attack stat is very dominant versus other fairy types. So all is looking good so far. There's some major potential out of these Pokemon, even in these Hero of Many Battles form. But of course, we know Niantic likes to potentially nerf the overall potential. We can't reach that maximum potential, all of course dependent upon the moveset. Now the moveset, we have some interesting things going on. First things first, we have 4 quick moves and 4 charge moves. We don't typically see that. Ideally, what you would like to have is 2 fast moves and then maybe 3 charge moves. We've seen that quite a bit. And of course, those moves be good and you can get the same type attack bonus out of it. But in this particular case, it could end up being a TM trap because, as you know, we can't pick the specific move unless you use an elite TM, which of course we're not going to do that just to get the ideal move out of 4, but it could be a trap is basically what I'm saying. So of course, if we go ahead and take a look at this, we've got Zamazenta on the left side, so the pure fighter, and it only has 1 fighting type move, and that's close combat. Close combat is not good, and we only have 1 fighting type move despite the fact that it is a fighting type Pokemon, which is unfortunate for this Pokemon. We have no move that we can pair up on the fast move side of it, and we'll talk about that when we get to the raid side, but not looking good so far. But we could pair up Snarl and Crunch, at least on the PvP side. I don't think this Pokemon's going to be able to do very well on the raid side with the fact that it doesn't have the stab kind of going on with that, but that's at least not terrible news. And then if we head over to Zacian, with Zacian being a pure fairy type, we can see that it does have access to Play Rough. And that's the only fairy type move that it has access to, but at least Play Rough is a good move, so we could of course try to pair it up with a fast move, maybe potentially for the raid side. And if I'm going to be honest with you, this is like the first time in history that when I took a look at these Pokemon in the raids, they literally did not rank in the top 30 in any raids based on their moveset combination. I tried doing some crazy stuff. Like, for example, if we go ahead and take a look back here, I tried doing Fire Fang and Play Rough and going up against a Breloom, because that's at least some synergy that you could get out of it. But what ended up happening was you're competing against flying type attackers, and they're going to be double super effective against Breloom. So it's difficult to compete from that. And then I came up with one for Zamazenta as well, but it just didn't end up performing well, and unfortunately did not get in the top 30 for any raid. That's disappointing, considering the fact that these Pokemon are literally legendary Pokemon, and they don't rank within the top 30 from anything on that raid side. So of course, a little bit disappointing, and that may dictate whether you want to go out there and raid for these Pokemon if you're only interested in raiding. But we can at least mention how you could take down these Pokemon. So we don't have the exact moveset loaded in just yet into the Pokebattler website, but with Zamazenta being a fighting type Pokemon, we could go in there with flyers, we could go in there with psychic types. We are going to have to watch out for a couple of movesets. Like, for example, if you go in there with a pure psychic type team, you may want to watch out for that double dark moveset of Bite and Crunch, for example. Just be on the lookout. That moveset in particular is going to be a little bit of a problem, but you can take a look at your auto recommended, and if your psychic type Pokemons are being shifted out, it probably has that moveset combination. But if you go ahead and take a look here, I think it's safe to just go with some flyers, go with some psychic type Pokemon, and of course it is going to be moveset dependent, and that's something that you're going to have to look out for. Similar situation with Zacian here, where if we take a look at Zacian with it being a fairy type, going in with the steel type Pokemon is probably going to be your best bet. Metagross, Meteor Mash all the way. Dialga actually ends up having some play. Excadrill ends up having some play as well. And we actually end up seeing some poison types, which is also pretty cool. We don't really see that too often. And then if we were to go ahead and head back to the moveset, if you want to use Metagross, for example, you just have to watch out for Fire Fang, and then you also have to watch out for Close Combat will do neutral, but it still could end up doing quite a bit of damage to you. So I at least wanted to kind of mention that. And then the final thing that we need to talk about is PvP. And luckily enough for us, when I headed over to pvpoke.com, these Pokemon did get their movesets added into the custom rankings that you can do. And when I took a look at the rankings, Master League ended up having the best set of potential for these Pokemon, and I excluded Megas out of here. And if we take a look, we can see that Zamazenta ends up being ranked at 29th in the Classic League, so level 40 or below. And we've got Snarl, Close Combat, and Crunch. That is something that we mentioned before. And we end up taking down some pretty common Pokemon. Dialga is super common. Giratina is super common. And then, of course, Melmetal super common. I don't see too many Raikou, but it does kind of pop up occasionally, especially since Raikou got Shadow Ball. And then beyond that, I think that Zamazenta at least has some play, which is exciting. Ranks a little bit lower. And then if we take a look at the moveset, interestingly enough, we can see that it has Snarl, Close Combat, and then it picks up Wild Charge. So we don't even have a fairy type charge move being used in PvP. It ends up competing against Palkia. Not as common, at least for me. Dragonite can be pretty common, Lugia common, Gyarados common as well. So I think that these Pokemon at least have some play from the PvP side, which is at least some good news, but it almost weirdly feels like a consolation prize to some extent. But hey, there's still some future value out of these Pokemon. They end up getting their stats changed. As you can see here, Zamazenta Crown form ends up being the more defensive version, so kind of like the shield aspect of it. So its attack stat does drop a little bit, which is a little bit disappointing, but it could kind of gear it up a little bit more for the PvP side. And if it ends up getting a better moveset, then potentially ends up being unlocked for the raid side. And then Zacian ends up being bumped up tremendously on the attack side, up to an attack stat of 331, ranked at 12th. So that is incredible for Zacian in the Crown Sword form. And of course, they both end up picking the Steel typing. So maybe they don't end up doing too well from their dominant typing of Fighting and Fairy. But if the Steel type moveset ends up lining up, you could end up having some competition versus something like a Metagross. I highly doubt they'll be able to compete with a Shadow Metagross, but these Pokemon at least have some potential. It's just so unfortunate that it comes down to the moveset. I hate saying that. I hate that it's a recurring theme, but it's just something that happens in Pokemon Go. And yes, you may say something like, well, it's not Niantic's fault, there isn't a fairy type fast move. But something you have to remember is Niantic is picking what moves are fast moves and what moves are charge moves. I just wish they would redo the moves to some extent and maybe change a couple of the charge over to fast. I think that would make a lot of sense, but I of course want to know what you think about Zamazenta and Zacian in the comment section below. Did Niantic kill these Pokemon? Did they kill the hype for you, especially if you're interested in raids? And if you are interested in PvP, are these still going to be good? I think at least for PvP, it's worth unlocking a secondary charge move. But as always, I would love to know what you think about that in the comment section below. So beyond that, I want to say thank you, give a huge shout out to the supporters over at Patreon. We have an exclusive Discord server. If you want to support the channel and want to connect with other Pokemon Go players, we of course talk about Pokemon Go all the time and all the topics going around. Make sure to check out the Patreon link in the description below, and I will see you next time.